It's time for CBJ in 30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. Find us on SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play Music, YouTube, and TuneIn. The easiest thing to do is tell Alexa or Siri to play CBJ in 30. Here's your host, Bob McElligott.
Tonight, the Blue Jackets take on the St. Louis Blues in St. Louis, the first of two meetings this year between the clubs. Welcome to CBJ in 30, presented by Telhio Credit Union. I'm Bob McElligott. Well, the Blue Jackets coming into this game after dropping their last two. Of course, they lost last Saturday in Philadelphia, let the game get away in the third period, and lost that one by the score of 7-4. And then just 2 nights ago at Nationwide Arena, they lost to the Edmonton Oilers by the score of 4-1. Blue Jackets made a roster move yesterday when they brought up Marcus Hannikainen from Cleveland. Well, they've got a game tonight and then another one at home tomorrow against Calgary, so that gives them a bit of an insurance policy when it comes to forwards. And we'll see if Elvis Merzlikins makes a start tonight. I suspect that he will. He came in and mopped up the game against the Edmonton Oilers. Wasn't really tested much as Edmonton had that game pretty much in hand, but you had to figure he was going to start one of the two games this weekend, and it would just make complete sense to go ahead and play him in this one tonight. So we shall see. Coming up in just a bit, you're going to hear about the St. Louis Blues from Chris Kerber. He is their longtime radio voice, and last year he got to do what all of us hope that we get the opportunity to do at some point in our life, and that is call a Stanley Cup victory. But first, I want to tell you about Telhio Credit Union. You know, at Telhio, they've got plenty of services, and they're not just personal services. They do have that. They have checking accounts. They have checking accounts that have great perks that go along with them. They've got savings accounts. They've got personal loans. All of those things for you personally that you might need. But they also have business accounts as well. If you have a small business, you need a loan for that just to get things going there. They can help you out with that. If you need a business line of credit, they can help you out with that. As a matter of fact, you can find out all of the things that Telhio Credit Union has that can benefit you either personally or as a business owner. All you have to do is go online to telhio.org. If you can't find what you're looking for, there is a tab that you just click on and you will get real-time help. You can live chat right there and talk to a person, chat with a person, get the information that you're looking for. They will point it out to you and tell you how they can help you when it comes to your financial needs. Or you can stop by any local office. Telhio Credit Union is open to everyone in central and southwestern Ohio. They are federally insured by NCUA. So again, the St. Louis Blues were the Stanley Cup champions this spring. Such a surprise because after Christmas, they were sitting dead last, but then they were able to rise from the ashes and do the unthinkable, and for the first time in franchise history, win a Stanley Cup. They did that after they fired their coach. Mike Yeo was let go. He was replaced with Craig Berube, and they also made a big change in goal when Jordan Binnington, who was toiling in the American Hockey League and had a really rough go of it in his pro career, finally got the call, got a chance to get into some games, and the rest was history, or it is history, however you want to look at it. It doesn't matter. But the guy that had his voice put down in history for all time, calling the Stanley Cup final and calling the Stanley Cup championship in St. Louis, is the radio voice of the St. Louis Blues, Chris Kerber.
A team that was in last place on January 3rd. The players on the bench are bouncing up. History will be made tonight in Boston. 15 seconds to go as Shen blocks a puck to the corner. 10 seconds remaining. Get up, St. Louis. Get on your feet. Raise them high. 5 seconds to go, and the time winds down. They did it. It's over. The game is over. The series is over. The wait is over. And the St. Louis Blues are the Stanley Cup champions for the first time in franchise history.
Chris, how long did you sit and think about that call before you actually made that call?
Well, probably since day one of getting into the broadcasting field, to be honest with you. And I don't even kind of mean that as a joke, but I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, where, sure, Bob, you've thought long and hard about what making a call like that would be like. And, you know, for those of us that maybe weren't fortunate enough to call a championship in the minors, to at least experience it at some level, you know, it was pretty amazing. When you get closer, more to, I think, probably the real point of your question, you think about the moment. I was making sure that there was no way I was going to script it. You know, I remember some interviews and hearing some interviews from Jack Buck and some other things. So I didn't want to script it. But you'll love this one conversation I had with Doc Emmerich before Game 5. I said, Doc, how do you prepare for a moment? And he kind of chuckled. He said, well, Chris, one of the things that's happened is Al Michaels screwed it up for the rest of us. And I thought it was just a fantastic line because he's right. There will be no more perfect call than Do You Believe in Miracles when you think about that 1980 team, the college kids versus the Russians, the political state on U.S. soil, everything like that. And so you just kind of have to call what comes into your mind. And frankly, what I learned, you always keep learning this business, but Game 7 against the Dallas Stars helped me out immensely and prepared me for Game 7 against the Boston Bruins. And you work a few things in. The game was still pressured in the Blues' end, even though the Blues were up by 3 goals, so you had to stay on the puck. And then it just kind of chronologically came out. So it wasn't scripted at all. And sometimes as a broadcaster, maybe I could over-critique the call, but people seem to like it.
No, I liked it. I thought it was real and genuine, just like you said, and I know exactly what you mean about you think what you would do in that moment. And then I guess you hope that, well, you got a chance to live the moment. I know for me, I hope that if I were to be in that moment that it would come across like I've thought it out in my head a million times. But let me take you back even further. How long did you know? Like, at what age were you when you knew what you wanted to do? For me, it was really early, or at least I knew generally what I wanted to do, like be in radio. Sports came a little bit after, but at what point did you know this is what you wanted to do?
I remember listening to the 1985 World Series. I was 15. I would have been 15. Listening to and watching the World Series, and looked at my dad, go, I could do that. And my dad goes, you can do whatever you want. And I was pretty much set at that point. That's what to me the origin was. I've always loved sports. I'm the second of 9 kids. My dad would tell you that I was always the one bouncing around a ball in my hand or had a ball in my foot somewhere like that. And I got into it. Absolutely love the strategic aspect of sports and how it goes. The nature of how things have to change, not only just game to game, but maybe shift to shift or inning to inning if you're in baseball, that kind of thing. And I think that's about when it started. And I just kind of chased it down after that.
Talking with Chris Kerber, he's a radio voice of the St. Louis Blues. And I was kind of the same way. I knew, like when I got to high school and I was playing baseball and I knew I couldn't hit. I could field a ball. I could catch a fly ball, but I couldn't hit. It was at that point that I knew if you want to stay in sports, you better figure out something else, right?
Oh, yeah, well, there's that aspect of it. I played as long as, I could play. There was no chance of me playing any sports in college. When I ended up going to Miami of Ohio, as some people there may know, and there was an opportunity to broadcast sports. And I got a marketing degree, a business degree. Chris Rose was instrumental. He was a year ahead of me, and he was instrumental in kind of helping set up the play-by-play aspect of the student radio station. So he was our sports director. Then when he became general manager, I took over as sports director. When he graduated, I became general manager of the radio station. Then we built the program up over there, and it's one that's had some other people kind of go through the steps there where you just get as much work done and as much practice as you can in college. So I knew talent-wise that there was going to be no recruiters knocking on my door, but I also kind of knew that I loved kind of the broadcasting aspect of it. And apparently when I was really, really young, I was kind of just pitching a fit as a baby, and I was so loud that one of my uncles at one point nicknamed me Leather Lungs. And so maybe something's a little apropos that we're doing this today.
Yeah, I think he knew something that maybe nobody else knew at the time. How proud are you of that, what you just talked about at Miami, to help to set up a program that, is, still there. And as you said, other people have gone through it and, they've had success out of it, to be one of the people that kind of helped to get things off the ground? Because I know you personally, and I know you're that kind of get things off the ground, get things moving in the right direction kind of guy.
You know what? There is a lot of pride that goes along with it. Like I said, the student station WMSR existed, but nobody was really doing much sports. Chris Rose, like I said, was one that really spearheaded that aspect of it, and now to this day, with what Steve Baker is doing, he continues to work hard there. They have students that are doing the production of the games for ESPN Plus, and they've got students on the calls sometimes. I mean, it's really a cool thing. And I went back. We had a day off before we played you guys in Columbus 2 years ago. Might be 3 seasons ago now. And so I met my old college roommate and some friends in Oxford. We drove in for a Friday night hockey game, and we're sitting in the stands. And I looked over in the corner, and there were these two students that were actually doing play-by-play into, kind of just like we were doing into a 4-track recorder and stuff. And I went over, and sure enough, they said, "Oh, we're doing the play-by-play for the student radio station." And that to me was just a really, really cool moment to think that basically close to 20 years later, so they were still doing it, and there was still an opportunity for people. I thought it was just a really cool thing to see that it was going, and that's not on me, and that's not even on Chris Rose and the people that came before us that even helped get that student radio station going. I think that goes constantly onto the students that continue to have a passion, find the need, and then find a way to make sure that that opportunity is still there.
Oh, and speaking of that, not just the broadcast opportunity, but that hockey program there and the building they get to play in, that's a good idea. If you were going to take a trip and get an extra hockey game in, what a perfect place to go, right?
Listen, what they did with Steve Cady Arena, because when I was there, it was the old Goggin Arena, and now there's a new, I think it's part of the business building built on top of where the old arena was. And lines used to go out the door from the old Goggin Arena all the way uptown. What they've done with that is phenomenal. If anybody ever gets a chance and they're curious, and they're hockey fans in Ohio, the history of the Miami hockey program and what Steve Cady, Mitch Korn, Bill Davidge, and those guys did to get that program off the ground and basically convince the trustees that, look, if you're going to have a chance at winning a national championship, it's going to be in hockey versus any other sport, and they're still right with that, is really something special. You're talking about a guy that's, and a group of people. Steve Cady got that program off the ground, and the way he did it was the way he was able to pay for certain things. He had to pay out of his own pocket, but then was allowed to keep the money from some hockey schools in the summer to reimburse what he had spent out of his own pocket to get the hockey program there up and running. It's a spectacular story, and I think one that is really special because Miami hockey has become a really big deal, as it should be, not only in the state of Ohio, but nationwide.
Now, once you got out of college, and you mentioned that where you decided that you could do this for a living was watching the World Series. I know I ran across you you were in Springfield, Massachusetts when I was in my first year in Syracuse. Between college and getting to the American Hockey League, what was the path?
So I had I had a business degree just in case I needed to fall back on that. It wasn't any good behind the microphone. And in the end, I've used that business degree as much as I've used anything over the course of my career. Because as you know, in the minors, you sell advertising, you do PR. And in the end, I was the director of marketing for the Springfield Falcons my last year there. So it was really cool to be able to get really kind of ingrained in the business side of it as well. I sent a letter to Doug Kirchhoffer, who at the time owned the Cincinnati Cyclones. And as I was going to college, whenever I put a little lesson for people, whenever I put a cover letter together, the end of the letter just said, look, even if you don't have an opening, if you have a few minutes to just talk about the business, I'm just trying to find my way in. And he replied, said, no, Terry Ficcarelli, the longtime voice there in Cincinnati. He was Terry Ficcarelli's been a long-time guy, we're good, but I wouldn't mind meeting with you. So it took about 2 months before one of their playoff games. We met on folding chairs in a stairwell in their at the old arena down there, and he said it turns out their Birmingham affiliate was looking for a guy, and so he sent the tape down for me and went down, met with Art Clarkson, and 2 weeks later was moving down to Birmingham, Alabama, and I worked there for 2 years. And then moved up to work with Bruce Lannon and Wayne LaChance and the Springfield Falcons for 4 before 2000, and then got the job back here in my hometown in St. Louis. So I was lucky. I was fortunate. I worked for some great people. I learned a ton, and just sticking your nose out there, writing a cover letter, and that line at the end, rather than just saying, hey, do you have a job? Can I have one? Said, even if you don't, do you have time to chat? Created a contact that really worked out.
I have a feeling that between then and now, you've told that story to a lot of young people with that same kind of advice.
Oh, absolutely. I remind a lot of young people that want to get into this business, and you've paid your dues, Bob, like others have. And paying your dues doesn't always have to mean you're going to the American League or a minor league system or something like that. There's so many other ways to do it, whether you're broadcasting high school sports, working for a station, doing the news and the weather in the mornings, the sports at night, whatever it may be. Paying your dues looks very different for a whole bunch of different stories. But either way, you have to pay them no matter what. And what you find is, one, do you have the work ethic to be successful? And for me, a lot of times when people aren't successful, it's because they're missing that work ethic. The other side of it is you have to learn and accept that this isn't a job. I mean, it really becomes a way of life. As you continue to grow in the business, what's what Art Clarkson said one of the first times we met. We work when other people don't. That's how we make money. So you're missing different events. You're missing school plays for your kids. You're missing, we're on the road this year for Thanksgiving, for example. You're missing things along those kind of lines. If that's not for you, then this business is going to be hard for you to be very successful in. So I talk to a lot of younger people about it being more of a lifestyle than a career decision. And I think they start to get that message. And, it really is that, because it takes that kind of time and it takes that kind of commitment if you're going to be on the road traveling.
With Chris Kerber, the radio voice of the St. Louis Blues, when you got that opportunity, when the Blues said to you, Chris, we'd like to have you, what was that feeling like for you?
It was really cool. It was a 2-week process. I dropped the tape off when I happened to be home. When I heard that Dan Kelly, of course, who used to do the TV for you guys, was leaving. And I dropped the tape off and got a phone call. He said, I got your tape. We'll let you know if we want to talk to you. And 3 days later, they said we should have talked to you while you're in town. We want to fly you back in. So I flew back in to town and did the interview. And they said, we'll let you know in 2 weeks. And 2 weeks later, they flew me back in. And he said, we'd like to offer you the job. And I said, okay, offer it. He goes, you want the job? I went, yep. Jim Woodcock was the guy that brought me home. He's now one of the top sports execs with Fleischman Hillard, a top-end high-end PR firm here in town. And Woody was the one that brought me home to St. Louis, and it's just been one of the greatest things ever to be a part of my hometown team. My girlfriend from Springfield moved with me. She's now my wife, Christy. We've got 3 daughters. They all hang around with my brothers and sisters' kids like that, like they are brothers and sisters. And it's special. Last night, Halloween night, they went around as cousins. And it's really kind of cool and pretty special to be able to call the sports in your own hometown.
Not only calling sports, but to go back to how this conversation all started, calling a Stanley Cup championship. How much have the last few months changed just the way of life in St. Louis? You've been with that franchise now for years, but having that ring for the very first time in franchise history, how's it changed not just the perception of the Blues, but just about maybe the appreciation of the St. Louis Blues?
If in some way we could make the Kraken a very positive beast of happiness, we could say that this released the hockey Kraken in St. Louis. It's really been a special couple months to hear how, and frankly, not even to hear, to see the emotion of people just crying when they get near the Stanley Cup, to see grown adults, male and female, physically shaking as they go to touch it, to hear the stories from the fans, and just to be a part of it and have some very intimate moments around the team with it, and then also be able to share it with family later on. It really has been something else. Humbling from a broadcaster standpoint when people compare some of the calls that we made with Joe Vitale during this run to some of the classic calls you grew up hearing from the Cardinals and football Cardinals and things. So it was really something just special. And you always knew that it was going to be impactful for everybody around here. But now we no longer have to wonder what that impact was like. We're seeing it. And here's an example. For the first time ever in the history of this franchise, this year there is a waiting list for season tickets. It's been pretty powerful.
Well, let's talk about this team where it is right now. And you guys, as you said when we heard your call back at the beginning here, last year in January, you were in last place. It's been a pretty good start to the year for you right now, 7-3-3 coming into this game against the Blue Jackets. Although You do lose Vladimir Tarasenko with an injury. How big is that injury? Because when I look at your team, obviously a very good team, and to me, the word team exemplifies why you won the Stanley Cup. I mean, you have a whole bunch of really good, really talented players, maybe not the standout superstars that some other teams in the league have, but you work together as a group really well. But Tarasenko is a really skilled part of that group. How tough is that to take, having him out of the lineup?
Well, it's huge. I mean, you guys know exactly what this is like, although he's left for good. You're trying to figure out, all right, how do we reshape a team and fill in for the loss of an offensive guy like Artemi Panarin? And in this case, you had an offseason to try and do with it, but when you get back onto the ice, it still looks a little different, it feels different, and you have to find a way to be successful, which is why, with the Blue Jackets, you see some really good spurts of terrific hockey, and then you still see some of those holes and inconsistencies because somebody has to fill in where they were not before. That's what the Blues have to figure out right now, 12 games into the season. So you're losing a guy that when it comes to even strength goals in the last 5 years, only Alex Ovechkin has scored more than he has in the entire National Hockey League. And so it's impactful. They tried last night. They started with Oscar Sundqvist for a game or two. They tried Sammy Blais. They tried some shifts with Robert Thomas. And I think they're going to continue to try stuff. Towards the end of the games, to get a little more, I think, veteran security there, they put Tyler Bozak on that line. It's a bit of a chameleon position right now for the Blues. Having said that, you're not going to replace him. You're just not going to go out and find another 33 to 40 goal scorer. And it just doesn't pop up. So they're going to have to find a way to get an extra 3 to 5% out of every guy. Jaden Schwartz, hasn't scored a lot of goals, picking up plenty of assists, but hasn't scored goals. Alexander Steen, Tyler Bozak, Barbashev, Sundqvist, Robert Thomas, all these guys have 2 goals or fewer. They're going to need some goals from them to make that up for it. So you're right. They're going to have to make it up as a team because you're just not going to pluck a guy out that all of a sudden is going to step in there and rip 40 goals to the net unless you find lightning in a bottle. And I just don't think that they have that kind of lightning in the organization right now. So it's impactful, but it is not something that they can't overcome as a group because I think there's some room for improvement from a lot of guys. That's not just the young guys. That's some of the veteran guys I just mentioned.
Talk about catching lightning in a bottle, and it seems kind of like that's what happened last year. I know it's not really that way because Jordan Binnington was a guy that was in the plans. He was in the minors. He was perfecting his craft. But, man, when he came to the league, you talk about just in life, getting an opportunity and making the most of that opportunity. I don't think you could paint a better picture than what Jordan Binnington did last year and continuing into this year, could you?
Well, Jordan Binnington finally got a chance to make his mark. And you have the background of his story is one where he kept getting pushed down on the depth chart. And he took responsibility for that when you talked to him. You had a guy that, I think it was OHL goaltender of the year. I mean, this guy had some talent. There's a reason they drafted him in the 3rd round. But he wasn't necessarily performing all that great at the American Hockey League level. And even at one point in time, they had sent him down to the East Coast Hockey League level, because they made the trade and they brought Phoenix Copley in from the Capitals organization, and then they draft Billy Husso. And the team seemed to be pretty high on Billy Husso. The Blues put Jordan Binnington on waivers 3 different times. And nobody in the National Hockey League picked him up. It's one of my favorite lines now. I did an event a few weeks back with Doug Armstrong, and somebody asked him about Binnington. And he said, he goes, I guess you could say that we were dumb, but they were dumber because they could have had him for free. And it was actually because of an injury to Billy Husso last year that had Jordan Binnington, the next guy up. And when things weren't going well in net, they decided to go ahead and call him up. He starts the game in Philadelphia, shuts out the Flyers in his very first start. They played Jake the next game. They put Jordan back in there, and Jordan took off. And he really still plays and has an edge, like he's got a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. And it's excellent. He's also got this dry, good sense of humor that teammates seem to really love. I get a kick out of it. And he fits in really well. What's even more amazing is after you then have a goaltender like that wins the Stanley Cup for you, that's a restricted free agent. Doug Armstrong manages to get him under contract for a 2-year deal at just under 5. So he right now has both Jordan Binnington and Jake Allen under contract for less than $9 million for this year and next year. So he's got amazing cost certainty when it comes to the goaltending position. And as you guys saw with what Florida gave Bobrovsky, that's not necessarily always the case in how things go. So it's something that's worked out really well for both guys. And if Jordan continues to play well and keep this up, Jordan Binnington's going to hit unrestricted free agency at the age of 27 and be due for a monster payday.
Yeah, $9 million for two goalies. That's what I was thinking when you said that. I know one goalie that got $1 million more than that per year just from one team. Ryan O'Reilly, from the time that he arrived, what has he meant to the franchise?
Everything. He's been the MVP. We just talked about Jordan Binnington, so we got to hang some on him. But the reality of it is the single most consistent player game in, game out since day one last year, all the way even through now, has been Ryan O'Reilly. I was standing next to Doug Armstrong when they had made the trade. We kind of went back to the practice facility to do a little bit with Doug Armstrong. And we stopped an interview I was doing with Doug Armstrong when Ryan O'Reilly called him. He had left a message for Ryan. Ryan called him back. Ryan was out on a boat. He had just gotten married the day before. Ryan O'Reilly, at the end of this interview, and Doug put it on speaker because our great production crew with Blue Note Productions kind of asked Doug, can we film this call? And Doug said yes. We told Ryan we were going to film it. Ryan O'Reilly says on the speakerphone, I can't wait to get there, Army. Let's go win a Stanley Cup. And it was, a pretty cool moment there, but he came in and just took off. Very deserving of the Conn Smythe, extremely deserving of the Selke. His work ethic and what he's demonstrated to the young kids is second to none of anybody I've seen in this league so far. I'm not exactly sure, other than I know the contract situation in Colorado and just a culture of losing in Buffalo, but they let a heck of a hockey player go, and all of us in St. Louis are extremely thankful for it. He's been outstanding.
And I guess, as you said, sometimes it just comes together. Sometimes it was just meant to be. And I'm so happy for you that you were able to be a part of that. I know every time we play Pittsburgh, and Mike Lang, who's been a part of 5 Stanley Cups, he tells me all the time, I think everybody should be a part of it at least once because it's such a special experience. And I'm sure that for all of you guys, it's a life-changing experience.
You know what? We just saw the Toronto Raptors win a championship for the first time, right? 2 nights ago, we just saw the Washington Nationals win a championship for the first time. We just saw St. Louis in June win a championship for the first time in all those respective sports. I couldn't agree more with Mike Lang. If it's not the Blues repeating, I would love to see another team get it for the first time, and much more selfishly, a broadcaster that hasn't had a chance to go through it and do it, because it's a special moment personally and professionally. And then you see the civic side of it with the city, and it's something that you will hold close forever because it is a come-together moment for a region. And I hope that the folks in Columbus get an opportunity to do it. I'm impartial to Ohio because of my time there in Oxford, because I've got so many great friends around the state because of going to school there. I think you guys have had a terrific organization. Your ownership has been so caring. They have built something so well. I think it'd be really cool to see Jarmo Kekalainen and the Columbus Blue Jackets pull it off and bring a Stanley Cup to Ohio.
Yeah, and I was going to say there are so many ties between both of our organizations, with John Davidson coming over from there to here when he came, and then bringing Jarmo in here, and Jarmo had been part of the Blues. So there's a lot of good back and forth, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Well, you just quality people. Good old quality Midwest values people. It's great to go in there, and you go in there and you see a familiar face. Todd's done such a great job over the years, on the PR side with you guys, and you're there and have now been there for a long time and have worked your way up. Russ, what he's done. I mean, there's just so much good that you pull for people like that. So I agree completely with Mike Lang that if it's not our own team selfishly that's able to do it and repeat it, you really would love to see it be a first for somebody else.
Absolutely, and that's why I was pulling for you guys in the Stanley Cup final last year. Oh, and by the way, Boston knocked the Blue Jackets out on their way. But, hey, it all worked together as far as I'm concerned. Chris, thanks so much for taking this time with me and talking to me and talking to our fans. I appreciate it. Again, congratulations to you, and look forward to seeing you tonight as the Blue Jackets and the Blues get together for the first time this year.
That'll be good. We'll see you at the rink tonight, Bob. Thank you very much.
That is Chris Kerber. He is the radio voice of the St. Louis Blues. He and I will be in the same building tonight, and we will be separated by a couple of booths But I'll tell you this, he'll be rooting for one side, and I will be rooting for the other side. I know, I'm telling you something that you were already well aware of. The game tonight gets underway at 8 o'clock. Our pregame coverage starts at 7:30 tonight on 97.1 The Fan, the flagship of the Blue Jackets radio network, and all across the network stations will have it for you tonight. Then the Blue Jackets are right back at home tomorrow when they take on the Calgary Flames at Nationwide Arena. That will be a 7 o'clock game tomorrow night. Our pregame coverage for that one starts at 6:30 tomorrow. But you can get your tickets for that game against the Calgary Flames right now just by going to BlueJackets.com. I would like to thank Chris Kerber for being my guest today. Thanks to you for being there as always. And tonight, it's the Blue Jackets and the Blues from St. Louis. Until then, I'm Bob McElligott saying so long.